Oh, in the Dzogchen tradition, generally there's no initiation, but there is a kind of transmission, or sometimes called an introduction. We're being introduced to ourselves, which is a strange kind of thing, because you would think we would know ourselves. The Tibetan term for this is ngotro, and ngo is linked with the ngowo, which means face. And our face has two aspects to it. We have our face, which we inhabit, but which we never see directly. Our face is, in a sense, for the other, though when the other sees our face, they interpret our face, whereas we are our face. And it's a very interesting thing to be your face. Could you ever see your face? So in the Zen tradition, one of the koans is to see the face that you had before you were born. That when you're born, you start to be able to elaborate an interpretation of your face. So if I want to see my face, I look in a mirror. The mirror gives me a reflection of the face. So I'm seeing my face at second hand. But the immediate face is the face of revelation. And our face is both a infinite open potential, and it's the particularities of our complexion, and it's the specificity of our expression moment by moment. And these three aspects of the face are central to the Dzogchen understanding. So if we want to recognize our face as it is, although the metaphor of seeing is used a great deal in Buddhist text, to see your own face cannot be about seeing something, because we can see the room, we see other people, we look around. And under that condition, it's as if I am the subject seeing objects, or I am the self seeing others. But to see your own face is essentially to become your face. And we become our face by ceasing to not become our face. That is to say, being is primordial. The quality of presence or awareness or being is the open potential of the mind as the space of belonging. And in the Tibetan tradition, there are many technical terms used to describe this. This is just our kind of being here-ness. You know, when you see a small baby and their eyes are just looking out, it's a very naked kind of face. It's the absolute openness to what's there. That is to say, our mind itself as awareness is naked. It's not covered over by any thoughts or feelings. It is the stage on which the thoughts and feelings are arising. It's not blocking the showing of these, but it is not the same as these. Because as we have been observing in the course of a day, we have endless sequences of how we are, as it were, showing ourselves, in which the energy of awareness manifests itself as particular patterns. But the ground or being or awareness itself is not a thing. It doesn't come into existence as something. So if we're trying to look for our mind, and we look in the manner of a subject who is used to catching objects, we're not going to find our mind. So we're used to identifying different kinds of plants, different kinds of vegetables, and so on. We do that on the basis of signs, of signifying marks. That is to say, our capacity to function in the world is our capacity to participate in the semiotic web. We take up particular interpretations and concepts, and by patterning them, we create these holograms of meaning. And we seem to find something true. When we say, this is Saturday, we seem to be saying, establishing something in truth. But in fact, of course, we're just creating a pattern of concepts. And Saturday will immediately have different connotations, depending on whether you're Jewish or Orthodox Jewish or Christian or Muslim. The days of the week will have different valencies. But the open quality of awareness is the ingraspability of the mind as something. You can't say there is no mind because manifestation is occurring, and the manifestation is the showing of experience, and the illuminator of that experience is the mind itself. So, on one level, in order to describe this, we have to use lots and lots of concepts because we're trying to go beyond concepts. And the concepts can't take us beyond concepts. But it's very difficult to see without the use of concepts. So you have the famous story of the Buddha teaching, and he holds up a flower, and Mahakashyapa sees the flower and gains enlightenment. Well, most of us aren't that lucky. In the tradition, it describes that there are different levels of transmission. So the first level of transmission is Jawa Gombigyu, the transmission of Buddha's mind to Buddha's mind. So it's a direct, unimpeded transmission. Then you have Rigzin Daigyu, which is the transmission of symbols. So when the Buddha holds up a flower, this is a kind of symbol, and somebody who's very attuned gets it. Then you get the third level, which is the transmission that comes in through the ear hole, the Gangsa Nyingkyung Gyupa. And that's what we are. We're kind of ordinary people, and we need to hear this stuff again and again. The problem, of course, is when the words come into our ear, we tend to mix it with the thoughts that we already have. And so staying with the freshness of the description as much as possible is important. So if it says the mind is naked, it means it has no clothing, it has no cladding. When we're sitting here and experiences are arising, the thoughts and feelings and so on, these are like clothing. These are temporary garments. And by putting on a garment, we develop a particular shaping into the world because our clothes are a kind of communication. That's why we have such a big fashion industry, because people are wanting to express some unique particularity of themselves and identify themselves in a particular position in the social matrix. The other side, of course, of clothing is that it covers the naked body. And that's the double element of the richness of our mental experience, that our thoughts and feelings and memories are the texture whereby we move into communication with other people. They are in the house of compassion. They are connectivity itself. But if you're not careful, the very intoxication of the meaning that's generated by attending to this clothing, this cladding, hides the nakedness of the mind itself. So that if you're always caught up in mental content, the naked mind is not revealed. Now, when we wear clothes, we're naked under the clothes. There isn't a fundamental contradiction between nakedness and clothing. It's not that nakedness goes away when you put on clothing. It's just that you can't see the nakedness when the clothing's there. So the unborn open awareness itself doesn't vanish when there is a preoccupation with thoughts and feelings. These thoughts and feelings are the richness or the display of the mind. The problem arises when we are forgetful of the ground, because the ground can't be captured. And also say that the mind is pure from the very beginning. It's kada. Means it's never been contaminated with anything else. We know what contamination is when you have ecological contamination, when chemicals go into a river. We have the contamination of food substances and so on. Some languages, particularly French, are very sensitive to the contamination of their language by the inclusion of particularly American words that are seen as some debasement of the capacity of French to develop its own ways of expressing whatever new phenomena are arising. So contamination has the notion that purity is vulnerable. Purity stands in relation to impurity, and if impurity meets purity, purity will be lost. So we have the tree, but the tree is rooted in the earth, and the earth transforms the seeming isolated, autonomous individuality of the tree. You could say that the tree as tree, because it's in conversation with the earth, becomes a bit kind of messy around the edges. You can't be quite sure what the treeness of the tree is if the tree is in conversation. Because when the wind blows, the patterning of the small branches gets shifted by the wind, and so you can't even say that the shape of the tree is stable, because the tree is, as we looked earlier, a conversation. Now, when it says that the mind is primordially pure, it's not referring to a relative purity that stands in relation to the presence or the non-presence of contamination. Primordial purity means that the mind itself, our mind, our awareness, is infinite. If something's infinite, it has no limit. If it has no limit, you can't talk about inside and outside. In Britain, we are now bravely going into independence from Europe. We will be outside of Europe, which means a marker or a boundary is established that as you cut away your integrated communication, you now find that you have to negotiate new trade deals and so on because you've taken up a place of separation. There is Britain and there is Europe. And before there was much more communication going on between them. We can have this notion that there are these two things, Britain and Europe. But they are both inside the world. These are aspects of geography, the geography of the world. They are part of exchange systems. So the basic connectivity is covered over by reference to the definition of we're getting our country back. We now have Britain as Britain. I mean, this kind of language would make you stupid very quickly because it's insane. It has no meaning in the world of interdependence, but you can see how powerful it is to create the illusion that we stand alone, our finest hour. And now we see in the papers that Dame Vera Lynn is going to be singing again to keep our spirits up. And this is the construction of a national identity of we stand alone in a hostile world. We are brave, we are bloody but unbowed, and we will make it together. Beautiful. So this kind of illusion is very, very tempting for us. We have to see how the idea of separation, whether it's a fear of different kinds of sexuality arising or different kinds of religious groups coming into the country, Britain will be spoiled. Britain will be changed. It's not the country I grew up in. So people are holding on to the idea that difference means contamination rather than richness. And this is a central kind of fulcrum point in the understanding of Buddhism. That if you tilt towards grasping and reification, you come into this fearful sense, I'm being changed by all these things happening. But we're always being changed. Change is normal. Change is not something which is imposed on you by unpleasant multinational corporations or by terrorists. There is always change because many factors are operating together. So what is primordial purity? It means the mind is infinite, nothing outside it. And therefore it's beyond comparing and contrasting. It's not this in relation to that. It's not Italy in relation to Germany. It's not like having a set of scales and you can weigh one pan against another. It is incommensurable. It cannot be compared with anything because it is incalculable. You can only start calculating if you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you have 0, you have to leap from 0 to 1, and then 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Now we know the difference between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 is the same. But what's the difference from 0 to 1? That's much more problematic because you can't find 0. So 0 shows the abstract nature of calculation. If there's nothing at all and then there's 1. So when we say the mind is pure from the very beginning, it's not something which can be brought into juxtaposition with anything else. It's not a thing. Oh, I am not a thing. We're here as a presence and awareness which is ever open and ever fresh, which doesn't block its own radiance, which is the endless flow of manifestation, which can take all sorts of patterning and open to all sorts of interpretation. But the ground of being or awareness itself doesn't stand in relation to these things. It can't be compared to them. Just as in the traditional example, the mirror shows many different reflections. If you were driving here, your wing mirror would have been showing hundreds and thousands of reflections, even in a short journey to get to this place. Image after image after image after image. These are all possible because the mind or the mirror is capable to show whatever arises. The mirror doesn't have any content of its own. And it is the emptiness of the mirror that allows it to show these multiple images. If the mirror had a fixed content, then you would be having to add on to other things. You'd be building up some kind of palimpsest, which is the structure of the ego, some kind of drawing or painting which is worked on again and again and built up through different strata. But the mind is fresh, and this arises, and this arises. The mirror is open, and it shows this, and this, and this, and this. The mirror doesn't edit anything of what is occurring. It just shows it. Awareness doesn't do editing. Now, this is very important when we come into doing meditation practice, because what we tend to find is, even when we relax and open, we get caught up in a kind of selectivity. We go into a response to what's arising in the mind on the basis of, I like, I don't like. I want to have more of this, I want to have less of that. And so we pull aspects towards ourselves and maybe merge with them and seem to incorporate them. Or we try to disown and distance ourselves from other elements and say, this has nothing to do with me. Why? Because I'm like this. So if you really see that, oh, the reason I get into this endless selectivity is because I have a shape. So we need to be clear then, what is the relationship between the self as a manifesting phenomena and the ground awareness itself? Everybody has a self. All the big lamas have a self. They know the difference between putting food in their mouth and up their nose. They're not daft. They know what's mine and what's not mine. They come out of the monastery and they know where their shoes are. So they say, these are my shoes. If they're your shoes, you got a self. Otherwise, you wouldn't know you're your shoes. Huh? So this idea that there is no self in Buddhism is a bit ridiculous. What it means is there is no solid, enduring, reified self. There is no self-substance. That is to say, a substance with an essence which endures as a thing through time. But the fact that we can recognize where we live, and we can remember when the post office closes, and we can remember what shoes we had when we came here, these are patterns of identification. Patterning doesn't necessarily have any substance to it. Patterning arises in relation to other people. So, for example, the shaping of our face is influenced by, maybe in the break you went outside and your phone rang and you speak to someone and they give you some news, and if it's good news, you smile, and if it's bad news, you get upset, and your face changes. We are labile. We are not fixed entities. We are responsive. This is what the self is. So rather than seeing the self as a noun, it's more like a verbal formation. The mind arises in one aspect as selfing. And this selfing is the emergence of patterns in relation to the emergent patterns of other people. This is not the same as open awareness. Because self-formation is influenced by what's around it, it is vulnerable. As a self, things will get to us. Now, we may look at a statue of the Buddha and he's just sort of sitting there and looks like, that guy's really cool. He's not influenced by anything. Is that helpful? You wouldn't have compassion unless you were impacted. What is impacted is pattern formation. So when somebody tells you a terrible story, or they tell you that someone close to them is now in hospital with a serious illness, our mood shifts. Their story comes to us. The quality of their face comes to us. It's absorbed into us, and we are, as it were, reconstituted. We're realigned in relation to that story. That's called compassion, isn't it? That's our empathic attunement, which is grounded in our willingness to be formed by the other. If we're in a happy mood and say, I don't want to hear this story. Shh, I don't care if they're sick. I'm having a good day. It's Saturday. Shut up. We'd say, well, you're trying to hold on to something. This is kind of inhuman, because you've been touched, but you don't want to be touched. I want to live life on my terms. I have had enough of listening to people's sob stories and da-da-da-da. I want life on my terms. And it's bad. This is what the great new president is like, seemingly like all the time. He wants to live life on his own terms. And whenever somebody does something that impinges on him, he really wants to push that back. Now, this is disconnective. This is saying, I am a self-validating, self-organizing, self-sealed phenomena. And I'm going to plonk myself out in the world, and you have to do what I say because I'm the cosmic egg and I can be how I am. That's not really our lived experience, because we are in the soft body of skin. We are touched and moved and impacted by what's around us, and we are reformed in conversation. Our ability to be reformed is grounded in the resilience and responsiveness of our capacity for selfing, that I'm willing to be interrupted and disturbed by others. Compassion is disturbance. Egotism is the enemy of compassion, because when we're egotistical, then we're trying to hold on to a fixed version of ourselves and to maintain it under all circumstances. But when we are participative and selfing, the patterning of ourself is going to be changing, just like the tree's branches blowing in the wind. There are certain elements of stability, certain limits in our manifesting capacity, depending on our energy, our age, how many other demands we have in our lives. But unless we're going to become sclerotic and build some fixed carapace, some shell around us, we will be touched and moved. And this is our connectivity. Now, awareness itself is not touched or moved. Awareness is like the clarity of the sky. It's unchanging. So there is a non-duality or a non-opposition between the luminosity of the mind, the fact that our awareness illuminates whatever is going on, and the pattern formations which arise as our participative movement, which is the energy of that awareness. So the energy is moving and shaping in a responsive way, and the awareness itself is never moving. And these two have been united from the very beginning. But because the non-moving aspect of our awareness has no self-substance in it, when you look for it, you can't find it as a thing. When your fixation is on the perception of things, you think, well, it's not there. So, who am I? Well, I'm me. Could you say a bit more? Yeah, I was born in Scotland. I do this, I do that. We can all run a self-descriptive story of ourselves in which we call ourselves into existence as a particular pattern formation. But of course, we describe ourselves in different ways to different people at different times. So we have lots of possibilities of describing our existence. But what do we exist as? If each of these descriptions is valid according to its circumstances, we can say, I am a potential that shows itself differently under different circumstances. So who are you? Well, that would depend. That's more interesting. That would depend. It always depends, doesn't it? How you want to introduce yourself. If you're fascinated by someone or not fascinated, if it's a policeman who's stopping you and asking you who you are, that will depend on how you feel at that moment. So our capacity for, as it were, self-disclosure or self-invention as a mode of participation is about the movement into formations, but because we have this plurality, this multiplicity of self-formations, none of them can be absolutely true. None of them can be definitively true. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're thirsty, sometimes we need a pee, sometimes we feel energetic and want to go out in the world, sometimes we feel more wounded and want to hide away. we all have these pulsatory moments, each of which, in the moment of its arising, is exquisitely true for us. It's how we are, but it's a how, not a what. There is no what. When you look for the what, there's nothing to get. But you get howing, so we get showing, interactive showing. So if we link this back to the idea of primordial purity, all of the different patterns of our self-formation, while they may have contradictions between themselves, so somebody might say, I thought you said you were very generous, but you were really mean to that person. Oh, was I? You have some image of yourself, and now your action has showed a contradiction. So you think, oh my God, well, I didn't mean to be. Actually, I try not to be. And we get into sort of self-rectifications to try and hold in place this shape. As if the shaping could be definitive. In fact, we are many different things, and there is no essential contradiction between this multiplicity. So, for example, in the Tibetan tantric system, Padmasambhava is said to have 8 main forms. He has many, many other forms, but he has 8 main forms. Some are a monk, a king, a yogi, a very wild, wrathful being. So sometimes he's peaceful and non-dangerous, sometimes he's very dangerous. Who is the real Padmasambhava? Well, the real Padmasambhava is the Dharmakaya, the ungraspable ground nature out of which these forms arise. There is no true formed Padmasambhava. There is no true formed Theresa May. There is no true form of any of us because we are multiple and responsive. And so part of the problem we face in life is that we're being called to account and we're being required to define ourselves as if we were reliable entities when we're not. There's a huge intolerance for unreliability. Commentators are always complaining that politicians say one thing and then another. Well, why wouldn't they? Life is changing. Why wouldn't they? But how can I believe in you when you change your mind? Well, the way to believe in me is I believe that James always changes his mind. Now you can believe in me because I will reliably change my mind. I will not let you down. The idea that we can become a self, which is the same on Monday as on Friday, this is what drives us crazy. Because then you end up being in kind of existential bad faith with yourself. Because you've proposed yourself as being one way, and now you find yourself being another way. But because our self is interactive, because it arises in dependent origination, because it's co-emergent, it's non-dual, that is to say, it's not a separated entity, but it's a linked phenomena, of course we will show different forms. This is part of the richness of life. The fact that I'm called into becoming with you according to how you are. So moment by moment we are co-emergent. But this is not all we are, because without the potential for that emergence, we might just be one particular thing. The fact that we exist as a potentiality is the richness of our energy, which is empty. So these are the 3 aspects of our existence or experience according to Dzogchen. Our mind itself, awareness, is open and empty. It's raw, it's never been cooked or prepared, it's not mixed with anything. It's always the same, but you can't find it as something. It is the ungraspable freedom which arises from being nothing, which is non-dual with everything. Everything is inseparable from emptiness, and the mind's nature is empty. So in the tradition it's called Yingrig Yerme, the inseparability of the Dharma Dhatu, or the space of all phenomena, and the radiant Rigpa awareness quality of the mind. Within this openness, everything arises together. So we're sitting in this room. Each of us has a sense of our unique specificity, but this is arising in the room with other people. So the field of your experience includes everything in the room, includes yourself. It's not me plus everybody else. It is the me, the meing of me and the youing of you as I experience it arise together. So I experience sensation in my body. I can look down and see the color of the trousers I'm wearing. I can see the color of your jacket, the mat you're sitting on, and so on. This is arising at the same moment. I experience you and I experience me. What I experience of you and what I experience of me is slightly different because I have access to proprioception, to the sensation in my body. I don't have that for your body. But I do have the shape of your body, the coloring of your clothing, your postures, and so on. You are my experience, and I am my experience. This is the field of experience. So in Dzogchen, this is called salwa, or clarity. It means that everything arises together, and then on the basis of our interaction, you have the particularities of feeling connected or not connected, of liking or not liking, of finding something to say or not having anything to say. We have these pulsatory interactions in the field, but these pulsations don't divide the field. It's not that there's me talking with you, but we meet and have a cup of tea and we find ourselves saying something. And the conversation, it's converse, it's verse, the movement is with, it's a linked, it's a co-emergent movement. Talking at someone is very different from conversing with them. So when I'm sitting here, I'm always looking around and seeing people's faces and trying to have a sense of how we are connected. Otherwise, I could write a little speech and just print it off and hand it to you. But when we engage together, we are all participating. Your quality of attention is an inseparable part of how I can talk. They arise together. It's not from me to you, because it arises from me as connectivity with you. And this is, I would suggest, how we enjoy our lives. We find ourselves in the flow of connectivity, which it allows infinite new variations of patterns to arise. We can't know in advance how we're going to be. This is the unformedness, the negative capability or the capacity to not know, which is the basis of connection. Because if you knew in advance, you would end up giving speeches or lectures to other people, and you would say, shh, wait until I'm finished. And then they would start to monologue and say, oh, shut up, shut up, shut up. And then you would start. And that serial monologuing, we know from our painful life experience, it's not very pleasant. It doesn't feel here, does it? So here-ness is, let's open to how it is. And that openness is actually the bloom, like the bloom on a flower. That's the sort of surface showing of the very emptiness of awareness. It's because we are not full of any fixed content that we can allow new content to arise. So then we can think of, well, what are the interruptions to that happening? When I'm preoccupied, when I'm hung up on something, when I can't forget about something, there's a kind of spiraling around, a repetition compulsion of following some train of thoughts and signifiers. And this pattern creates a foreclosure to receiving new impressions and then to finding myself being in a new way, because I've got to work this out. And I think the solidity of self-preoccupation is something that we face again and again when we meditate. Because we sit, we relax, we open, but then we find we're caught up in stuff. This caught-uppedness, this attachment, goes in two directions. Sometimes it looks like I'm wanting to get involved with this. I'm wanting to think about it. And at other times it's almost like the thought formation is catching us. We can't get this out of our mind. We feel persecuted by these burdensome thoughts which might keep us awake at night or have us avoiding certain situations that seem to stimulate them. I am caught up in something. I don't want this to happen. So we've got a kind of shaking to try to get rid of it. But the shaking doesn't really get free of it. So if an attack dog like a Rottweiler was to bite you on the arm and you try shaking it off, that dog is going to clamp its jaws much more firmly. So when you try to get rid of thoughts, you get the same kind of feeling. You find you can't get rid of it. Thoughts go free by themselves. They arise and they pass. We know this because all the thoughts we've already had today, our thoughts, feelings, and sensations are always moving. So why don't we just allow whatever comes to come? Would it matter if we had lots of weird thoughts? Well, I wouldn't like that, because I'm not the kind of person that has that sort of thought. So there we see the freedom and the openness of being, which doesn't need to defend itself because it's invulnerable. Just as the mirror is never contaminated or defiled by any reflection that arises in it, because although the reflection is, as it were, inside the mirror, it doesn't touch the mirror. So the primordial purity of the mind is described as vajra, or indestructible, or invulnerable, because it's, in that sense, it's like the mirror. Whatever thought arises in your mind passes through your mind, but it doesn't leave any trace. Where it does leave a trace is not on the luminous openness of the mind itself, but in the patterning of our self-identification, where we think, but I don't want to have these thoughts. I'm bored with this, or that's horrible. And so we want to get rid of some thoughts and feelings, and we want to hang on to other thoughts and feelings. This editing function is the sort of biased and limited and you could say perverse site of participation. So I'm wanting to participate in the world on my terms to get more of what I like and less of what I don't like. And this bias or partiality means the things I like are really good and the things I don't like are really bad. And that really is implying not just the emotional quality of intensity, but that there is a true badness to the things I don't like, and a true goodness or validity to the things I do like. And once we enter into that way of interpreting a bad thought or a negative thought or a thought we might be ashamed of other people knowing that we had, seems to have the power to define who we are and to contaminate who we are. So the openness of our subjectivity, our capacity to receive all the different aspects of whatever is emerging, has become restricted because I now have an anxious self-edifice which I'm trying to maintain. And I've decided that it's provided nutrition by the factors that I do like, and it's put into danger by the arising of the factors that I don't like. And so now I'm in this endless work of editing and manufacturing. So the principal instruction in Dzogchen meditation is, once we relax and open, allow whatever is arising to come as it comes and to go as it goes. Don't try to correct the mind, don't try to improve the mind, because what you're doing is working on the patterns of emergence of the radiance of the mind, how it's showing itself, how it's manifesting, not the mind itself. So, just to summarize that, the mind has, if you like, these two main aspects: open, empty, indestructible presence, just a pure awareness, a pure capacity to show or to allow to be revealed whatever is arising. And out of itself, there manifests an energy of manifestation, what traditionally is called Rigpitsel. And this manifestation is the movement of our particular thoughts and feelings in response to what's occurring. Can something come out of nothing? Nothing comes out of nothing. So what we have is the mind is nothing, or nothingness, or emptiness, or shunyata, which is in relation to awareness, it's called rigtong, awareness and emptiness. This displays itself as the clarity of the field, which is called saltong. And within that, you have the movement of appearances of momentary experience, and this is called nangtong. And these three are inseparable. Appearances are the appearances of emptiness. That doesn't mean that they're nothing at all. It means that you can't find a true essence inside them. There are many ways to kill a human being. So you could attack their head, you could attack their heart, you could squeeze their kidneys, you could rupture their liver. We get these mortal blows. These are intrusions, lesions, traumas onto the body, which will bring about either an instant or a rapid or a slow death. We talk about our vital organs, because there isn't just one vital organ. And we understand more and more that the body is a vast communicative system. It's the communicative interaction between all these pulsations or emergent qualities which gives rise to our being alive, being in the world with others. What is the essence of the body? There is no essence. The body exists as collaboration. What is the essence of a country? That will depend on the dictatorial systems that are laying down the rules of history and so on. People will have different opinions. Is there an essence to anything? You can take, in the preparation of wine, you can take the dregs at the bottom after you've strained off the wine, and you can distill that, and you get grappa or lili, or these strong alcohol formations, a distillation. And you could say the distillation is an essence. But it's a one-way movement, because you can take the grapes and squeeze the grapes, and then you end up with a grappa. But you can't reverse it and take the bottle of grappa and make some grapes. So the essence, which is the grappa, is far away from the grape. The grape has been killed in the production of the essence. So when we have a living thing like a tree, because it's communicating with the sky and the air and the sun and the roots and the mulch, and there's many kind of chemical communications as we understand more and more between tree roots, a really fantastic area of inquiry now. Where is the essence of the tree? There are many different ways to kill the tree, but does a tree have an essence? So this is an invitation to think, what is the seeming isolation and internal integrity of the phenomena that we encounter, which allows us to impute, to imagine, to attribute to them an internally defining essence and a solid self-substance, the inherent self-nature. And when we examine that again and again, we see that there's nothing there. Now, somebody has kindly made a little cemetery for dying flowers. It's a kind of hospice for tulips. So we can sit and watch the gradual demise of these tulips. And they're going to die because they've been cut off from their roots. They're cut off from the bulb. So we're watching the process of dissolution. Because for the life to occur, the bulb is in the soil, mulch, and then it starts to rise. But even if it was kept, it would only have a particular amount of lifespan, and then that's used up. All arising phenomena are vanishing phenomena. There are no fixed entities anywhere. So this is the general Theravadan and Mahayana analytic perspective, and it's very, very helpful for us to do as an adjunct to Dzogchen meditation, because it allows us to put into question these assumptions, these unexamined nexus of belief, which catch us again and again. We think, oh, there's a bunch of tulips, which would be a normal thing to say. But the fact that they are removed from their necessary ground is often made invisible to us. Things flourish due to causes and conditions, and if these causes and conditions change, they no longer flourish. And we are like that. We know that, if you're at work and things are going on quite well and you get a good staff team, and then maybe the manager resigns and you get a new manager and they want to kick ass and show you what's what, and they tighten all the regulations and they call you in for interviews. What am I doing here? I've lost my place of work. What is this? That the transient construct that we were abiding in and that we felt at home in has been destroyed. It never was there. So we have factors of creation, factors of maintenance, and factors of destruction. For the tulips, we have, because they're embedded now in this fresh water, these have, if you like, second-order factors of maintenance. The water will keep them going for a while, but the water lacks the capacity to repair the flowers. Their path to death has already started. So in everything that we see, there are factors of maintenance. Chapels like this are all over the country. Often they're turned into flats, they're chopped up in various ways, because the movement in the culture of that particular Christian orientation, which was once very strong, once a really dominant and determining orienting factor in people's lives, starts to ebb away. People 150 years ago probably couldn't have imagined that that would ever happen. Say, well, we're a Christian nation. This is how we are. This is what we believe. People would have said grace before their food. They might have said prayers at night before they went to sleep and so on. These were the factors that gave continuity, and it created a kind of bubble. And then gradually, due to many different factors in economy, international trade, the nature of education, and so on, that ethos, that organizing and guiding set of ideas starts to loosen its power. And then here's a building. We don't even need to think that this is once a consecrated building, a sacred building, a building dedicated to a sacred task, and therefore we need a minister or a priest of some kind to come and suck the sacredness back out of it so that the architects and the builders can get on with their job. But a building's just a building. So the very notion of the duality of sacred and profane is largely vanishing from the culture as vulgarity becomes the dominant way of being British. Just thought I'd slip that one in. We could do an amateur Trump karaoke, I think. But these things are so important because history shows us again and again that things are constructed and then they fall apart. You know, we've got many poems like referring to Ozymandias and so on. Nebuchadnezzar's feast. The powerful will decline. The powerful will decline. And the power of our structures also will decline. When I left the NHS, the little department that I had been in charge of for quite a while and had set up a particular mood and way of doing things, a month after I'd gone, it vanished. The new person who came in had a different idea, and now they do whatever they do. It's not my cup of tea, but I'm not drinking from that cup of tea. So that's what it is. And we think, how could they do that? And the answer is always very easily. Very easily. Because what we take to be truly real and to have intrinsic value is just our opinion. So this sort of reflection is a very useful way of avoiding hubris, avoiding the inflated notion that our idea or our belief is somehow a guarantor of truth, a truth which should be protected and should endure. So in Buddhism, they're always talking about the illusory nature of phenomena. This is the middle way between a kind of nihilistic view that it doesn't matter, it's all rubbish and we'll all be dead soon anyway. Or these are really important things and we all have to strive to maintain them. Illusion means that pattern formation is ceaselessly forming and reforming as the dynamic of our interaction. And this dynamic or moving field will not be stabilized by anyone. You cannot stop the river. You cannot stop the flow of life. Whether you like things or don't like them, life goes on. We see how war suddenly spreads in some countries. Some idiot dictator takes over and starts arresting people and torturing them. And these horrible waves of patterning, of karmic formation, capture human life for a while, and then it releases and some new pattern arises. Inside that, we can do the best we can. But it's always working with circumstances. It's energy engaging with energy, which can be skillful or stupid, which can be brave or suicidal. It can be a self-selection of martyrdom, or it could be a more subtle way of approaching things. What you will not get is stability in movement. That's the bottom line. If you want stability, if you want real peace, you already have that in the nature of awareness. But if you look to manifestation, to the patterning of yourself, to thinking that you could establish a stable personality, to live a life in which you are happy all the time, in which you were your own person, that way madness lies. So from the Dharma point of view, the Buddhist point of view, to find our original face, to find the primordial ground of being, to find the awareness which has never changed from the very beginning, we need to release our fixation on the dialogic intermovement of subject and object and allow ourselves to be the space within which the movement of experience is occurring. Awareness means being aware that we are present without being something as such. This is a great mystery. When we look at the phenomena in the world, things exist as something. A car is not a cow. An apple is not an orange. Compare and contrast, category allocation. That's how our cognitions, our conceptual elaboration functions to give a seemingly enduring structure to identification. But awareness can't be caught. It's not a thing. You can't pin a tail on the donkey. There's no donkey there. The mind is not an object for itself. It is self-luminous awareness, but you can't catch it. You can never know your mind, but you can be your mind. We are awareness. And that's a very important distinction. So we'll take a break for lunch now. Have a little bit of time. We can go outside, see the fresh air, see the movement of the trees and nature. And the key thing is to allow yourself to receive all this that is there. Because the ever-active turn of modern life that demands you stay on the job, stay ahead of the game, try to work out what's going on, means that we're very tilted forward onto the next thing that's going to happen and the next thing that's going to happen. This is just a chance to relax a little and receive the movement of the wind on your face, the chill of the air if you're in the shadow, the warmth of the sun if you're letting the rays touch it. And all of these experiences are changing and moving in time. You're warm in the sun, suddenly the wind blows and you get a little bit cooler. Pulsations. It's this, it's this, it's this. And this is how to open ourselves without appropriation. Because having a story about our experience, being able to explain it and give it an account of it to someone else is not the center. The center is to be present in the moment of the arising itself. And actually, if you're not here, you're not here. Looking at other people's holiday photos is not much fun. And even for the person who was on holiday, looking at their own holiday photos, it's not the same as being there. Being here now is all there is. The rest is representations, elaborations, and it's thin gruel. It's a very thin soup. But the richness of life is the aesthetic immediacy which is available moment by moment. And some of it will be dark colors. Some of what arises in immediacy is pain, misery, loneliness, sadness, regret. These are part of life. And once we start scissoring away and snipping and editing to make the sort of life we want to have, we're in bad faith with ourselves. We're telling ourselves a lie because we haven't found the way to accept sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm demoralized, sometimes I don't care. That's a taste, that's a flavor. And then after half an hour, something else has occurred. It's when you take what you see as a negative experience and feel it's fundamentally unacceptable, and I don't want to be like that, You yourself are making the solidity of that experience. But being jealous or selfish or sad or self-pitying, these are just parts of the flavors of life. So the encouragement of the practice is not to turn away from the infinite patterning of experience. Neither should we merge into it and take it to be the eternal truth of who we are, but just to allow, oh, this is today's flavor. This is this moment's flavor. And this brings a richness which then can come out in our way of responding to other people, because we have more empathic attunement. We have got more capacity to resonate to their despair when we have had our own despair and have allowed ourselves to know, I despair. It didn't kill me. It's not pleasant. But not pleasant is the marker of a flavor. Sour and bitter are flavors. Not pleasant is just a description of a flavor. It doesn't mean it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't mean where are the psychic police, this shouldn't be allowed. It's unpleasant. Why shouldn't life be unpleasant? Very interesting. So how can I hang out with the unpleasant? Well, before I get into judging the intolerability of unpleasantness, I have to find a way to be with it. And it may well be that when we hang out with the unpleasant, it's not so unpleasant.